3 days after my father died, I walked into the kitchen at 10:30 in the morning and found my husband Daniel drinking coffee in his sweatpants. I stopped with one hand still on the doorway. "Why are you home?" Daniel looked up from his laptop. "Morning to you, too. It is Wednesday. I know what day it is." Dad's funeral was not until Friday, and I had spent that morning arguing with the florist about whether my father Victor would have wanted an arrangement called Heavenly Garden. Then I noticed Daniel's company phone was not on the counter. Did something happen at work? He closed the laptop. "I quit when yesterday. Nora, do not make it sound like I joined a cult. Normally that would have made me laugh." Daniel had always been good at slipping humor into uncomfortable conversations. For 22 years, it had gotten him out of trouble. "Why would you quit your job yesterday?" "Because I do not see the point anymore." "The point is generally the paycheck, you know what I mean?" "No, I do not." He studied my face, then said it casually. "Why keep working? Your inheritance is enough for both of us." I just stared at him. Dad had been dead 72 hours. I still had his last voicemail on my phone because I could not delete it. Sympathy cards were stacked beside the toaster, and my husband had apparently already retired. "What inheritance?" Daniel gave me a look. "Come on, Nora." "No, tell me your dad sold Victor Mechanical for millions. His house is paid off. He had investments. He barely spent money." "How much do you think I'm getting?" "I do not know exactly." "Then how do you know it is enough for you to quit working?" He hesitated. That hesitation bothered me more than the answer. "Well, even conservatively, it has to be a few million." I remember thinking he had done math. I had not. I knew Dad was comfortable. I knew he had sold his heating company 6 years earlier, but we had never discussed what I would inherit. Daniel reached for my hand. "Look, I have worked since I was 22. I am 55. 33 years of quotas, airports, meetings, clients calling me on Sunday because apparently air filters are a national emergency. Maybe we finally get to enjoy our lives." There was something in that I understood. Daniel had been tired for years, but understanding why somebody does something does not automatically make it reasonable. "You quit without talking to me. I knew you would worry. That is not a defense. I was going to tell you." "You did tell me after you quit." He sighed. "Can we not do this right now?" I almost laughed. Right now was an inappropriate time to discuss the decision he had made, because my father had just died. For 22 years, marriage had taught me when to forgive before asking questions. That evening, Daniel's mother Diane and his sister Melissa came over. Diane brought lasagna, and Melissa brought wine. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt almost normal. Then Daniel started spending my father's money. His mother was complaining about another rent increase when Daniel said, "Do not worry, Mom. Once everything clears, I will buy you a house." I looked up. Diane blinked. "Daniel, I am serious." "Oh, honey, I could not let you do that." Then she added, almost casually, "There are some nice little ranches near Westerville." That was when I realized this conversation might not be entirely new. Melissa smiled. "Look at Mom. She already has a zip code." Diane waved her off. "I have looked." "That does not mean anything." Daniel laughed. Then he turned toward Melissa. "And we will get you straightened out too." She frowned. "What does that mean, your debt, the business stuff?" "I will give you 200,000 clean slate." Melissa put down her fork. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely." She got up and hugged him. I sat there holding my water glass. Nobody had asked me anything. Not how I was doing. Not what Dad's estate looked like. Not what I might want to do with whatever he had left me. They had moved directly to distribution. Daniel. He looked at me. "What Dad has not even been buried." The table went quiet. His smile disappeared. "Nora, that is not what this is." "What is it I am talking about? Taking care of family." I looked from him to his mother, then to his sister, whose family? Diane immediately looked down. Melissa sat back in her chair. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That is unnecessary." So was promising $200,000 that nobody asked me about. Melissa raised both hands. "I do not want to be in the middle of this." That was an interesting statement from someone who had accepted $200,000 less than a minute earlier. After they left, Daniel followed me into the kitchen while I wrapped the leftover lasagna. You embarrassed my mother. I embarrassed your mother. She already feels uncomfortable accepting help. She seemed to recover, Nora. I put the foil down. You had no right to promise either of them anything. We are married. What does that have to do with promising Melissa? $200,000. He rubbed his forehead. If your dad left you, what? I think he did. We are talking about more money than we will ever need. That still does not answer me because you are turning this into something it is not. What is it then? He gave a tired little laugh. There is not going to be your money and my money. We are set. I did not answer. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because some part of me was doing what I had done for years, deciding whether this was really worth a fight. Daniel had always been generous, sometimes with things that were not entirely his. He once loaned my SUV to Melissa for 4 days and told me afterward. When his mother's water heater died, he promised we would cover it before mentioning it to me. He volunteered our house for Thanksgiving so regularly that one year I found out because Diane asked what time she should bring the rolls. None of those things had seemed enormous. Marriage is full of small irritations. If you have been married long enough, you learn that not every hill deserves a flag planted on top of it. At least that was what I had always told myself. The next morning, my phone rang while I was standing in Dad's bedroom trying to decide which suit he should be buried in. Nora, it is Samuel Green, Dad's attorney. We exchanged the usual awkward condolences. Then Samuel said there are several estate documents Victor wanted me to go through with you. Could you come in tomorrow morning? Of course, Daniel can come with me. There was a pause. Actually, Samuel said, your father specifically requested that our first meeting be with you alone. I looked through Dad's bedroom doorway toward the living room. Daniel was sitting on the couch with his laptop open. On the screen was a used boat listing. For the first time since Dad died, I wondered what my father had known that I did not. Samuel Green's office was on the 4th floor of an older brick building downtown. Samuel met me at the door himself. I'm sorry about Victor. Thank you. He led me into his office. There was a legal pad waiting on the table, along with a bottle of water and a box of tissues. Samuel sat across from me. We talked about the funeral, the death certificate, the house, and ordinary estate matters. Then he closed the folder. Before we get into numbers, there is something Victor wanted me to discuss with you. Okay, did Daniel ever tell you that he came to see your father without you? When about 8 months ago, I shook my head. No. Samuel nodded. He contacted Victor more than once. There was an in-person conversation, a later phone call, and eventually an email. What about my father's estate? My husband discussed my father's estate with him. Samuel slid a single sheet toward me. It was a copy of a letter in Dad's handwriting. I recognized the blocky capital letters immediately. Victor authorized me to give this to you after his death. I read the first few lines Dad wrote that Daniel had come by one afternoon and started talking about retirement. Then I reached one paragraph and stopped. Dad had written down the exchange almost word for word. Daniel had said, "Once Nora inherits, I can finally stop working," Dad had answered. Nora inherits. Daniel had laughed. Come on, Victor. We are married. That bothered him, I asked. Yes, why did he not say something to me? We will get to that. I looked back at the page. What bothered me was how perfectly it matched what Daniel had said in our kitchen. There is not going to be your money and my money. Apparently that idea had been there before Samuel opened the estate folder. Your father did very well when he sold Victor Mechanical. His assets intended primarily for you are valued at approximately $3.8 million, not including the house. Most of those assets are held in a trust. Victor established before his death. A trust for me. Yes, what does that mean? It means you are financially secure. The unusual part is that for the first 5 years, extraordinary distributions require approval from an independent corporate trustee. A large gift to another person would qualify. I stared at him. So Dad put somebody between me and the money because of Daniel. Samuel answered carefully, partly because Victor was concerned about pressure. I am not 12 years old. No, he could have talked to you. Then why did he not? Samuel looked at me because he did not want to leave Nora his opinion of her husband along with his money. I stopped breathing for a moment. That sounded exactly like Dad. He did not want you spending his last months defending Daniel to him. That one hurt, because Dad knew me. I probably would have done exactly that. When I got home, Daniel was in the kitchen. What did Green say? There is a trust? How much? I looked at him. You meant how much? Okay, fine. How much? I am not discussing numbers today. Why? Because I buried my father this morning. Daniel paused, then asked, how long until the trust paid out? So we need approval to use our own money. My inheritance. Can we borrow against it? I do not know. Did you ask? No. He exhaled. Nora, I already quit. There it was. Not I made a mistake. Not I should have talked to you. I already quit. As if his decision had created an invoice and I was responsible for paying it. That night I went to bed early. After 1, I woke up thirsty and heard Daniel downstairs speaking quietly on his phone. No, do not panic. A pause. Then the money exists. It is just tied up. Melissa, I knew from the tone. I will figure it out. Another pause. Then he said something I can still hear. Exactly. Nora will come around. I stood halfway down the staircase in the dark. Normally, I would have walked in and demanded an explanation. Instead, I went upstairs. For once, I wanted to hear what he said when he thought I was not listening. The next morning, I made coffee and asked what he had promised everybody. Besides the house for your mother and the money for Melissa. What else? He stopped spreading peanut butter. What else have you planned, Daniel? It is 7 in the morning, I know. He pulled out a chair. What do you want to know? Everything, he said. He had been thinking about a lake place near Buckeye Lake. He wanted to invest enough that we could live comfortably without touching much principal. He wanted to help his mother help Melissa and maybe spend winters somewhere warm. None of those things sounded terrible alone. The problem was that Daniel had built an entire future for us without asking whether I wanted it. Anything else? No. You sure? Yes. When did you quit? I told you Tuesday. No, when did you actually resign? He looked toward the window. Daniel, the morning after Dad died, he rubbed his face. Yes, you called your boss Monday morning and quit. I sent the resignation. Monday morning, we had already discussed it. My boss and I discussed me leaving weeks ago. Dad was still alive. I stared at him. You were planning this while my father was still alive. I have spent 33 years working. I thought my life could finally change. You mean because of my inheritance? He looked away. Then what was it? He stayed silent again. For the first time, I wondered how many decisions Daniel had made because he believed I would eventually say yes. And for the first time, I was not sure I would. Over the next 2 days, I discovered how far Daniel's plans had gone. First came an email from a real estate agent thanking us for our interest in a lake property. I learned Daniel had put down a refundable $5,000 deposit. That evening, Diane said she might not renew her lease. Then Melissa called. She wanted to know when things might clear the estate. Why I have been talking to a creditor. I sat at my desk staring at the wall. Daniel had not merely made promises. People had started making decisions based on them. When he came home, I told him about both calls. You told Melissa to stop negotiating her debt, and your mother thinks she is moving. You did not just spend money we do not have. We do have it. I looked at him. I have it. His face hardened. What is your money? Yes, you have never talked like this before because you promised away my inheritance. He shook his head. Victor really got what he wanted with that trust. Do not blame my father for the fact that you quit your job. I did not say that. You did not have to. The next morning, I called Samuel. Was that conversation with Dad the only time Daniel talked about the estate? Samuel was quiet. No, so I went back downtown. Samuel opened another file. He slid several pages toward me. The first page had a title, Hale Family Investment Plan. I laughed because my husband had turned my father's death into a business plan. I turned the page. There were investment returns, a lake property housing assistance for Dan, debt resolution for Melissa, and retirement projections for Daniel. I kept reading. Dad's estate value appeared in 3 places. So did my name, Nora's. Expected inheritance, Nora's assets, Nora's projected investment income. I turned back to the first page. What is the date? Samuel did not answer. It was right there in the corner. 11 months before Dad died. I sat back. 11 months, not grief or panic. Daniel had been designing this life while Dad was still alive. I went through the pages again, Samuel. There is nothing here about what I wanted. He nodded. I was everywhere in those pages and nowhere in them. Before I left, I told Samuel, I do not want any inheritance transferred into our joint accounts. That evening, Daniel was waiting in the kitchen. Did you talk to the trustee? Yes, I am not requesting the money. His expression changed. Any of it. Not for your mother, not for Melissa, not for the lake place. For the first time since Dad died, Daniel looked scared. Until that moment, he had never believed I might say no. I watched him carefully, because something had finally shifted between us. The question was no longer whether the money existed. It was whether I would allow someone else to decide what my father's final gift meant for my life, and that frightened him more. Daniel did not speak to me for the rest of that evening. The next morning, he called his former boss. He asked whether there was any way to reverse his resignation. His position had already been offered to someone else. When he hung up, he stayed at the table. What did he say? I asked. My job is gone. Maybe we can figure this out together. We can figure out what happens next. That is not the same thing. A week later, his mother and Melissa came over. They wanted to talk. Melissa said she had already changed things with her creditors because Daniel had told her the money was coming. I told her I had never promised anything. Diane spoke about rent and how frightened she was about losing her apartment. I understood her fear. I did not hate these people, but love did not give them ownership of my father's money. I told them I needed time. After they left, I called Samuel. I asked whether I could help Diane buy a modest condo. He said a request might be possible, but asked one question. Is this what you want? Nora, I realized I did not know, so I waited. A few days later, Diane came to see me. She said Daniel had told her I might reconsider. I had never told him that. She mentioned the inheritance and asked what I was saving it for. I looked at her and understood. Everyone had already decided the money belonged to them. I told her I had not submitted anything to the trustee. She left disappointed. That night, my daughter Emily called. She knew Daniel and I were fighting. Are you going to end your marriage over money? No. Then what are you doing? I am trying to understand when your father decided being married to me meant he did not have to ask me anymore. She became quiet. A few weeks later, Daniel and I sat together with the investment plan. He admitted he had created it 11 months before Dad died. He wanted freedom and a way to help his family. I asked one question: where am I in this plan? He looked at the pages. Your name is everywhere. My money is everywhere. I am nowhere. Daniel finally understood. He had built a future around my inheritance without asking. I told him I needed him to move out. He asked if I was divorcing him. I said I had not decided. Daniel moved out. Months passed. He found another job. Melissa handled her debts. Diane renewed her lease. Nobody lost everything. Daniel and I began counseling. He apologized. Later, I chose legal separation and eventually divorce. I kept Dad's inheritance protected. I invested most of it and created a fund for Emily. Years later, I understood his greatest gift was not money. It was precious time, time to see clearly, time to stop confusing peace with respect, and time to finally make my own decisions. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more stories.